Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support this channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Today I am reacting to a short video by William Lane Craig where he deals with the topic of people deconstructing their faith. Many of others have done so, and I want to give a nod to Mindshift and Rabyd for their excellent videos on this one, and which I will leave a link to in the description. I was going to actually kind of skip it because I felt that their stuff was so good that what else could I say, but then I remembered as a pastor I might have a unique perspective from that former pastor point of view. I did, after all, deal with people leaving the church and faith in Jesus long before I did so myself. I had conversation with many former Christians before I became a former pastor and Christian myself as well. So what I have to say about deconstruction has been going on for a long time. Deconstruction itself is maybe the name is new in the last 5 to 10 years, but it's always been there. I think philosophically, deconstruction of ideals and worldviews and things has been a part of philosophy for a long time. But let's start the video and see what Bill and his son do here.
The very in vogue thing, I think I've seen it on TikTok, the deconstructing your faith movement, whatever that means specifically.
Now, the term might be a little new, but I have been using it since I started this channel over 4 years ago. And I know I heard it from someplace else before that. It's not an in vogue thing or a movement. It's something that happens historically and has been happening historically for a long time. Well, a number of former Christians who are no longer Christians have been growing for a couple of decades. It is not vague as to what this means, and it's actually very simple. It's the process of getting rid of the negative effects of one's former faith, although it does start with questioning one's faith and often staying in the faith but questioning it first. To say that it's just a part of a TikTok trend or something like that, that's just not true. I've been YouTubing on deconstruction for 4+ years. I know many other channels have been doing it for longer. So to say that this is just kind of recent faddish thing, that's just nonsense. And it's deliberately misleading. And it kind of sets the tone for how I began to look at this video when the first time I saw it. Okay, we're going to mislead people about that. What else are we going to mislead people about? Deconstruction has been a reality in the United States, I know for sure, for a long time. It's not a thing that is popular or recent. It is something that is happening inside the church and outside of it. To characterize it this way is just wrong. Okay, it's not accurate.
But how would you respond to folks who say that they feel better after doing that?
I think how you feel is irrelevant. What?
Yeah, I know I could do the obvious and point out that Low Bar Bill, a title William Lane Craig earned with his own comments, has basically says that the main evidence that he says he stays a Christian is really his witness of the Spirit, which as a former believer and pastor, I now recognize as just a feeling that convinces you that something is true. It's an appeal to human intuition, and you don't get more feeling-oriented than that. If he really felt that feels don't matter, he would retract that statement about lowering the epistemological bar, and he would also retract his statement about the real reason he believes is some sort of witness of the Spirit. He would do both, but he doesn't. But that is not the problem looking back at my former pastor days. My conversations with people deconstructing had little to do with feelings, but more on the evidence that Christianity was true became a problem for most of them. It didn't make sense to them that Jesus would have to appease God if he was God himself. God sacrificing himself to appease himself for the rules that he himself created didn't make a lot of sense to them. Doctrines of the church, theology, the historical evidence were all lacking or didn't make sense to these people, and were far more in the front of the people deconstructing's minds as I talked to them. There usually wasn't something going on in the church or bad experience that caused them to leave the faith. It was more of this assessing whether or not Christianity was true. Sure, there's an emotional gambit that goes along with that, but a lot of these people that I talked to that had left the faith didn't really have a negative experience. And plus, it was over usually a 1 or 2 year period that they deconstructed. How does an emotional experience go for 1 to 2 years when you're rationally considering something. People who had bad church experiences, in my experience as a pastor, just switch churches. They don't give up on Christianity. They just give up on their church. People deconstructing leave church altogether because of the personal study in the matter and a realization they don't want to attach themselves anymore to something that is patently untrue. And that's why they leave.
I could well imagine that some people who have been really struggling with Christian faith would feel real relieved about letting it go. But that doesn't determine truth.
Yep, and neither does the witness of the Spirit. But the typical apologetic trope of you just want to sin is kind of implied here. I think the real feeling of relief is more about the unnecessary guilt that you experience as a Christian, as it's lifted off your shoulders when you realize there's no good evidence for God, sin, or salvation. The cycle of guilt, repentance, and the catharsis over that is over as an unnecessary roller coaster. But as usual, the most apologists, he must stick with the Bible's statement about people who do not believe the faith. He never seems to get that it is highly possible that those statements written in the Bible long ago are there to inflate his ego, to keep him in his faith, are also early attempts at apologetics to keep him in the faith despite the evidence against it. After all, he has his witness of this Holy Spirit, which isn't emotionally based at all.
Feelings are very deceptive and misleading. The question is, what is the truth? And I am not in the least interested in deconstructing someone's faith.
You're a person with faith, but that isn't how it works. There's kind of an assumption here on William Lane Craig's part that people leaving the faith is based on the emotional appeals and actions of anti-apologists, but that's not my experience. Deconstruction is often a long process. It takes years. Sometimes it involves study, searching the evidence, questioning the religious leaders. I find myself as the Bible answer man as a pastor in my church for decades, being approached with these questions and offering up some of the same answers that William Lane Craig and many other apologists would make regarding them. Every time I found myself doing research to answer the questions they had about the Bible, Christianity, etc., people deconstruct their own faith. It isn't something done to them. If anything, they are emotionally trying to hang on to it. But the truth is more important than their feelings. And in the end, for many, it feels like somebody died. Only later does the feeling of relief come when you realize that this cycle of sin, repentance, and believing that you're now righteous in Christ end. There are many emotions involved, but they are the result of searching for evidence and reasons to keep one's faith. They're more the result. They're not the means. Notice, I'm not denying emotions are not involved in deconstruction. But the problem here that William Lane Craig is presenting, deconstructing, is purely emotional. And I don't think he is ignorant. That is not the case. Maybe willful ignorant, as some have suggested, but I don't think so. I think Craig knows it's more than some emotional and feeling-based process. He is saying the end result of the feelings of relief was the goal all along, and the motive and basis for the whole process was this goal of getting relief from having to live up to the faith. That is misleading, and I think deliberately so. The reason I say this is I've been watching William Lane Craig for a while. He has engaged people who have left the faith for years. Whether he would have known that the term deconstruction was used for it or not, well, I suppose, whatever, we can debate that, but as somebody with a philosophical degree, I know that he would have heard the term in philosophical context, and he can't be ignorant of that. He once accused apologies that the reason he deconstructed, apologia, Paul did, was that his Christianity was brain dead, indicating that Paul lost his faith because he didn't have any good reasons to keep it. So he knows that part of the process is based on reason and evidence and the search for reason and evidence that Christianity is true. And this was several years ago. The fact is, deconstruction is often a rational inquiry followed by emotional effects as the discoveries are made. William Lane Craig knows both are involved in the process. He's had a lot of experience as apologist and probably answering pastors' questions, things like that. I'm sorry, I know he's done a lot of Q&A, and he should know that this is more than an emotional process. People go through this for years, and now somehow he's painting it as purely emotional and has no rational element.
I'm interested in constructing a Christian world and life view that is biblically coherent and in accord with the best philosophical, scientific, historical, psychological facts that we know.
But that's the issue for many who deconstruct. Most people have noted that William Lane Craig is trying to channel people into Christianity at this point. But I noticed something a little bit more subtle as a former minister. The list of things he gave, philosophical, scientific, historical, and psychological facts we know, I think this reveals his hand a little. These were the areas, people in my experience, that people researched and found wanting to believe in Christianity at all. He is including this list for a reason and acting like they all line up with the biblical account. But the truth is that all of these areas are what led myself and many others out of the faith. The philosophical arguments for God are fallacious. What science and the Bible are saying are two very different things about reality. Historically, the evidence for the Bible is slim and none. Psychologically, the reason people believe things are not true is well known as the psychological reasons for the basis for religion. As a former pastor, these are the areas I got the most questions about, and William Lane Craig knows that if he has talked to other pastors for even a minute about the issue of deconstruction. He is including them because he knows that the irreconcilable differences that many see with the Bible involve the philosophical, the scientific, the historical, and the psychological. That's why he includes them at this point as an attempt to undercut the reasons people deconstruct. I don't think this is accidental. I don't think he's getting off script at all. And given the questions that I was often asked as a pastor revolved around these very areas in relationship to the Bible.
And so I think the whole project of building a Christian world and life view is one of construction, not deconstruction. And these people who are deconstructing, I suspect, are just reacting emotionally to bad experiences they've had in the institutional church.
Everything that guy just says is bullshit.
Suspect, huh? So you're basically saying that you haven't really talked to people deconstructing then? That would be a more honest approach, but your conjecture is a false one, and I don't believe you. Most people have had bad experience in the church just switch flavors and go to a different church. People who deconstruct their Christianity are not tearing it down to destroy it when they first start out. It's more like a person who takes apart something to see how it works with the full intention of rebuilding it with a better understanding, only to discover that some parts don't exist and that it worked at all was simply an illusion. He misses the motive most people have for deconstructing their faith altogether, which is to find a reasonable faith, only to discover that there's very little rationality to faith at all. That is a cardboard mock-up with no real philosophical, scientific, historical, or psychological backing at all.
Yeah, I mean, given the pervasiveness of this on social media and other things, I mean, do you have any kind of ideas or thoughts on root causes or how this has gained traction?
From what I've been told from people who do have more experience with this, is that these folks tend to come out of very conservative Christian churches that have been authoritarian, and they have often had negative emotional experiences in the church that have left them hurt and damaged, and they're reacting against that.
What?
Citation, please. I want to know who these people are. I want to know what their basis for this observation is. Besides, your whole life has been dedicated, William Lane Craig, to apologetics in many ways, and part of that has been to provide a rational, reasonable reason for people to stay in the faith. It means it's what you do. So I find it very hard to believe that you've had little experience with people deconstructing. I mean, the whole lower the epistemological bar comment you made was in the context of being predicated on a person who asked you a question about it that many people ask when deconstructing about evidence. You have engaged the deconstruction questions your entire career, and yet you want to boil it all down to an emotional reaction? Come on, man. It seems to me you're counting on the fact your audience will basically have their confirmation bias kick in, and they won't look up whether what you said is true, or that they will even go to find a person who is deconstructed to talk to confirm their observation. But definitely for me, citation and names, please.
And as I say, following emotions is not the way to get at truth. That is deceptive and misleading. And so I guess what I would want to do is not so much criticize them. I mean, we can have compassion on them for what they're doing. But I want to present an alternative, more glorious vision, namely a vision of constructing a Christian world and life view that makes sense of reality and is biblically consistent.
Yes. And this is the issue with people deconstructing. They look at the Bible and find it internally contradictory and inconsistent, and it doesn't line up with the realities that philosophical, scientific, historical, and psychological inquiry show to be reality. It is the process of trying to do what William Lane Craig is saying and finding it impossible because the Bible isn't coherent and doesn't line up with reality. This is why I think the whole thing is deliberately done on his part. A lot of commenters think Craig gets off script at this point and his son is trying to salvage it, but I don't think so. I think this whole thing about what he's talking about as this project, the construction of the worldview that makes the Bible coherent and lines up with these various aspects of realities, in essence, is deconstruction, and he knows that from his personal experience as an apologist. I think he's trying to do a few things here. He's trying to keep people from deconstructing in the first place by steering them from that to constructing a project of coherent Christian worldview. He is also trying to get those in the process of deconstruction to thinking that they are just shift gears a little, they can remain Christian by deconstructing something rather than deconstructing it. But he doesn't really know the nature that most of the time people are trying to do just that. They're trying to look at their faith and save it and come up with good rational reasons. But his whole idea of reasonable faith kind of hinges on that, doesn't it? He is attempting also to gaslight people who have deconstructed into thinking that the whole thing was an emotional reaction. It's this last part that I find truly repugnant because it's deliberately trying to say, oh, you didn't really get rid of your faith for rational reasons. The real problem was you had this emotional reaction to something that happened in the church. Admittedly, conservative fundamentalist church can have a lot of problems, but usually it's that same kind of fundamentalism that also causes you to look at the Bible a lot closer, and eventually that's what causes you to deconstruct. The real problem is I think that his strategy will backfire. What he's unwittingly done, actually, is he will find more people engaging in his little construction of Christian worldview project along his criteria, and it will fail. That is because I know that the people deconstructing are the ones who engaged in this very project in the first place and found it to be FUBAR. It's the honest searcher that Craig needs to avoid, but he's trying to keep everyone in the Christian worldview camp while they're doing it. But in the end, true honest inquiry into the true claims of Christianity leads people to deconstructing from it.
I think that positive, glorious project is one that can capture a person's imagination and help to free him from these emotional things that would drag him back down.
Yeah, distraction is an old magician's trick. I learned that one from Penn and Teller. What you're trying to do is get focused on your project so they won't notice the flaws in it. But William Lane Craig is also making a big mistake, because by focusing people on this project, this is the very project that most of us went on to become deconstructed and no longer having faith to begin with. It's trying to fix it and to make it better. And when we do that, and we're trying to make the Bible coherent, we're trying to see if it lines up with philosophical, historical, scientific, and psychological reality, that we found out that it really doesn't do that. And the Bible is incoherent and doesn't line up with reality. The project goes from trying to save our faith to deconstructing our faith. A few off-script remarks at this point. I know a lot of people think that William Lane Craig got off script at this point, but my experience as his pastor and my experience with apologists kind of tells me they know for a fact that what they're really doing most of the time is trying to keep people in the faith. And I don't see any difference here in what William Lane Craig is trying to do than any other apologist has done for years, which is he's trying to keep people in the faith. And once you realize that that's what he's trying to do, then it kind of makes sense what he's doing. A lot of people do feel that he got off script and his son tried to get him back on topic, but I don't think so. I really think that whole mention of trying to construct a Christian worldview that is biblically coherent and lines up with reality, whether it's philosophical, scientific, historical, and psychological, he knows that those are probably the four main reasons that people find the Bible incoherent. And so he's kind of pushing people to this project where they're going to keep working on this coherency thing and trying to make it coherent. What he doesn't seem to realize is that's why most of us deconstructed in the first place. My process was a long one. He's trying to make it into an emotional thing. How do you maintain emotional hurt over something for years? Okay, that just doesn't seem to work in reality. The fact of the matter is, most of the time when people deconstruct, it's a long, often involving years-long process. And the more you dig into it, these historical realities, the scientific realities, the philosophical things, trying to dig into the very things that he says that we need to try to be working for a coherent worldview, is the same reasons that most of us left, is because we began to realize it doesn't line up with reality, and that the Bible is incoherent, has contradictions, it has things that are just irreconcilable, and it just doesn't line up with reality. The real trickery here is the misdirection. He's trying to channel people who are deconstructing to thinking, oh, you're going to be doing something better by constructing something instead of deconstructing. It's an emotional appeal. But here's the thing about deconstructing something. When people repair things, they often tear things apart. That's deconstruction. Deconstruction can be a very positive thing, and he's trying to focus on it, making it completely negative. He even says so in the video that, we need to be more positive. But my point is this: deconstruction is a positive. If you feel something is broken or not working and you tear it apart, find the flaw in it, fix it, and then it works better or works again, that's deconstruction to lead to a better reconstruction. What he doesn't seem to realize is sometimes when you deconstruct things, you find out it doesn't work at all, or it never did work. And you find out the flaws in it. And he doesn't seem to understand that often repair work involves deconstruction and then reconstructing it. It's something that I have maintained on this channel since the beginning, that deconverting from your faith has two processes. One, you have to deconstruct from all the old stuff that you no longer believe in, that you realize is no longer reality. And then you have to reconstruct your life under different circumstances, along different lines. Come up with you need to come up with your own worldview at that point. That's the challenge of deconverting, is that eventually you have to engage the reconstruction process. And often these two things are going on simultaneously. As you get rid of something from your old life of faith, you also reconstruct something else that is better. So what he fails to understand is part of the deconstruction process is also reconstructing your life afterwards. And he doesn't seem to either understand that, although I think he does. I'm really leaning to the fact that he understood exactly what he was doing throughout this entire video. And so I guess I'll leave my observations at that. But he doesn't seem to get the fact that deconversion as a whole involves deconstructing your faith, analyzing your faith over a long period of time. He seems to think it's all this emotional process. And I do want his citation. I want the list of the names of the people that supposedly know this better than him, that tell him that it's all purely emotional, that they all come from conservative churches, etc., etc., etc. He makes that claim, but he never backs it up. And I want to know what the evidence is for that claim. And until he gives it, I'm going to call BS on him, okay, and say this whole thing was contrived, including the part about reconstructing a new Christian faith. He's hitting the four areas that most of us left the faith over. Once we tried to line those four areas up with a biblical thing, it fell apart. And that's why we deconstructed. And he unwittingly maybe has created a problem where, go ahead, get people to study the Bible and try to make it coherent with reality. The more people try to honestly and legitimately do that, the more people will be deconstructing. So thanks for that. Well, that's it for this one. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate everybody's likes, shares, and subscribes. At the time of the making of this video, I am very, very close to 5K, to 5,000 subscribers. So, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet already, I would encourage you to do so. You can make me hit that goal very, very soon, and I would appreciate that very much. But in any case, all likes, shares, and subscribes are greatly appreciated, because it helps me have the YouTube algorithm notice this video more and continues to help us with our mission here to normalize atheism and deconversion, so that people look at the atheist no differently than they look at anybody else, instead of thinking that they're morally inept or whatever, that all the other propaganda bullshit that they do. That's kind of our goal, is to get people past the propaganda about atheists and get them to the reality of atheists, and deconversion as well, as this video hopefully will help people do. And as always, one of the best ways to support this channel is membership. Consider becoming a citizen of the Rabyd Nation. You know, you buy your citizenship here, so and that's always helpful because it allows me to worry less about the YouTube algorithm, although I probably always will, and worry more and focus more, actually probably more on the content that you've come to love and enjoy. And I appreciate that, all my members. And so I want to give a shout out to all my citizens, to all my Rabyd citizens, to all my Tribunes at present. Thank you very much. I appreciate your continued monthly support. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. Your life is very precious when it's finite. So make sure you're giving all your time and opportunities and your money to things that build up yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.